Hey, welcome back to JG3 Reviews. My name is James, and around here I like to explore the world of fountain pens, ink, paper, all that good stuff, and I like to share with you what I find and whether or not it's any good. Today, it is a first impressions review of this new entry to the budget end of the fountain pen market. This pen I purchased just the other day for a little over $7, and that included free shipping to my door, and just a little bit of patience because it did have to come halfway around the world. This is the Hongdian C1, a new hooded nib pen that I think looks quite interesting, and I'm really excited to get to share it with you and to see how it writes. Because again, first impressions, I have not yet inked this pen up myself. You're getting your first impression as I get mine. Well, first, right off the bat, what I like about the appearance of the pen is in this all-black model. I think it brings out best the minimalist design overall. This is a very simple design, and I just think the black looks great. My only criticism of the appearance of the pen would be that it is a bit of fingerprint magnet. As you can see, it's glossy, and my fingerprints are going to be all over it by the end of this review. This in a matte black, like on that Black Forest pen, I think that would be quite the winner. It would take away that gloss, although I do like the almost Knight Rider Kit Car slickness of the black that is on this pen. Just looks really good. So let's look at the top first. Up here we have a stamped finial that says Hongdian and Longtian, and I apologize for my pronunciation, which I believe, unless Google is fooling me, means blue sky. And that Hongdian logo. Very, very simple, just an inset stamped finial. Then we come down to that clip, which is the matching gloss black. It's nice and long and stiff but springy. I think that'll work quite well. Then just a simple matching trim ring. Then we taper down that barrel and have just a polished pressed end. So very much a minimalist approach to the outside of this pen, especially in the all-black version. In the colors, you have colored barrel and colored cap with the same black clip and black trim ring. I think that monotone black version looks the best to my eye. The cap is a simple slip-on cap. It posts securely, and since it is metal, there is a little bit of back weight, but I find that just fine. I've got a lot of other pens with about the same balance. If you prefer to write unposted, it does still have a good length for most hands, and since it is a hooded nib, of course, you have that long grip section, and you'll be able to find some kind of a happy spot in there. This is actually one reason I like hooded nibbed pens, is that generally you end up with a really long section, and that just gives you more options to find your little Goldilocks spot. Now, the pen from this angle looks like mini classic hooded nibbed, maybe Parker 51-esque, although this is not meant to be a pen that looks just like that. Very, very simple, again, but done well, and it looks good. And that grip section, of course, is plastic. The barrel is metal. It is metal on metal threads here, and there is, as you can see, an O-ring here. I'm seeing that on more and more pens all the time, even in the budget end of the market, and I think that's a good move. And of course, it's a Hongdian, so it does come with a converter. Now, this is not standard international. This is the 3.4 millimeter bore. And Hongdian does sell their own cartridges, but there are other cartridges out there that are 3.4 millimeter bore cartridges, so that's what you need to look for. Now, I mentioned that this is a metal pen, and that may come as a surprise to some because many of the ads on eBay, more of them from sellers that I'm not familiar with. Now, some of the sellers, especially ones I'm not familiar with, are calling this pen plastic, but you can already see here at that ring that it is indeed metal, brass or a brass alloy, and as you look down in the barrel with the LED here, you can definitely see that that is indeed a metal pen. Same is true again here for the cap. It is again that same metal, and I can feel it in the temperature. We've got cold weather today, and I can feel the difference here just in this cap. And then you will also see that there is a plastic liner to help prevent dry out and wear on that plastic grip. Now, looking at the grip, I do need to say that when it comes time to clean your pen, you're going to want to use a bulb and flush this pen out. That's how I cleaned this one out initially. And by the way, found that this had been dip tested. I washed some blue ink off the nib of this pen, and when I tested it to see if I was going to be able to remove the plastic grip, no. My pen, at least, is glued on, and so that's as far as I broke this down. Now, speaking of that nib, of course, you don't get to see very much of it. But this pen is offered in extra fine and fine, and I ordered the fine, and it is, of course, a tubular steel nib. My experience has been that Hongdian tubular steel nibs can be replaced with the same that would go on a Jinhao 51A or a Wingsung 601, and that means that if you want, for example, a mini Fude nib, like this bobby nib, and if you don't know what a bobby nib is, I'll put a link in the description, then you can do that. I use a rubber strap that was sent to me by a kind viewer to get some grip on that, and sometimes I will use very gently, very carefully, needle nose pliers and that strap to simply pull that nib. You just pull it straight out, and then you can replace it with one like this. This is my Schaefer Icon. I really like this pen, and I really like this nib, which, as you can see, was inked. For those of you new to hooded nibs, that may be something you hadn't thought of, but you can do nib swaps on hooded nib pens as well, and this one is no exception. All right, for our size comparison today, we have, of course, the Hongdian C1, and then that Schaefer Icon, a little bit shorter and stubbier than that one, and then just a perennial favorite here on the channel, the Jinhao 51A. This was my very first one right here. It's just a little old faithful pen. I paid $2.50 for that puppy, and what a great pen that has been. And then another favorite, which I still have not reviewed on the channel here, my Lamy 2000, which of course is hooded nib as well. And here are the pens in their unposted and uncapped length. And here the C1 is the shortest of these pens, which I think comes as a bit of surprise to me because capped and posted, it is definitely not the shortest. But yeah, definitely is here. That Jinhao 51 is actually the longest, but just by a nose. All right, which pen is the longest is kind of fluid in this comparison. It depends on the state of the pen, because posted, now the Lamy 2000 is the longest, and then that Jinhao, and then the Hongdian C1 just barely behind it, and that Schaefer actually kind of almost catching up to the C1. All right, it's time to put this pen to the real test. How does it actually write? Again, the model here is C1. This is a fine, which I appreciate the option for, because most of the time hooded nibs seem to come just in extra fine. Every now and then you get a extra fine, fine, medium, but not nearly as much variety. That's the downside of them, I think. Test this for wetness. Of course, I've just been talking, and it's not too crazy wet, not overly dry, but just one more time since I've been talking. Yeah, about the same. So a little bit dry, but not too bad, and I think actually that suits this particular ink. And what is today's ink? Some of you, when I started writing, knew this is Noodler's Lexington Gray, which is probably my favorite gray ink so far. And I don't know why, but for some reason I really like a gray ink that looks like you've been writing with a pencil. There is just a slight bit, I can't write and talk at the same time, it's just a slight bit of audible feedback and a little bit of a smooth, kind of funny that I just mentioned that about the ink, but a smooth pencil-like feedback. Really, really writes well. Yeah, I like that. It's not draggy at all. I don't feel an immediate need to work on that nib. It's a good out-of-the-box nib in this pen. Somebody mentioned, they'd like to see me go past the letter H, but I guess I'd have to buy wider paper. I don't know how that would work. All right, who can guess what these things have in common? They are all foods that people either love or hate or love to hate, okay? I'm a fan of sardines, but not everybody is. Saw a recipe this week for the sardine poo-poo platter, and, the title of it, I think, was something like, "This sardine poo-poo is going to change your mind." Well, I got to take that to a potluck someday. Durian? Yeah, I've had it, and that's such a weird food to me, and it really seems to appeal to some people, and they just absolutely love it. But for me, it's almost like the gobstocker on Willy Wonka. It changes flavors as it goes, and 1 minute it's this delicious coconut or banana flavor, and the next thing you know, you get slapped in the face with a rotting onion. I don't know what to do with that, but some of you love it, and I respect you for that. Iced coffee? Well, people love iced coffee, but personally, I think it's what squirts from the devil's pituitary gland. I can't do with it. Coffee is either hot or not, so it's just the way it is. So, you know what? This is going to be the question today. It's not going to be pen related at all. What's a food that you love, but everybody else seems to just think you're nuts for actually liking it? What would be that thing? What goes in that blank for you? Because I just think that's I like to know that about people. It's just kind of an interesting thing. Food is very personal, isn't it? Let's do our speed test. Keep in mind that I've been yakking with this pen uncapped, so I've kind of made the test a little bit harder. And you know what? I think, there's nothing. Even I didn't lift. Mark your calendars. James didn't have 2 lifts during the speed test. No, that did great. And one of the things that I like, and let me tell you about this, one of the things I like about this ink, which I'll do a video on it later, maybe this week or next, I find it very reliable. My pens seem to like it, and I have a pen or two where that's basically all I ever use in them, and the ink is great, and I really like it. And again, I don't know why. It's weird, but I love that it looks like you've written with pencil. So let's talk pros and cons. Pro is value for money. Pen, first impression, seems really well put together, as is typical for Hongdian pens that I have tried. I think I've only ever had one Hongdian pen that when I got it, the nib needed some real work. It was dry and it was scratchy, and that was actually not one of their cheaper pens. That was a special edition pen that they did, that's Hongdian 100, which I haven't done a video on, but I will soon because I want to share with you how I fixed it. But this one, straight out of the box, good, quality is nice, weight and balance are good, comfortable in the hand. I guess I've run into another pro. And I'm going to say the ergonomics. And again, this is, for me, typical of a hooded nibbed pen, especially one that's not thin and narrow. And this is a nice broader body for a hooded nib pen, and I like that. So ergonomics, quite good. All right, let's look at an unknown. I decided to put a question mark instead of a positive or a negative. An unknown, of course, will be dry out, and I'm only going to mention this because I don't know. It's a first impression review. It'll be on people's mind, and that's still a question. What I'll do is, if it tends to be a bad offender, if it's just a terrible dry out pen, which you get every now and then, I'll mention that and pin that comment in the comments below. Otherwise, no news is good news, and it'll take, of course, about a week or so before I can make that comment if it needs to be said. I'm going to put a pro is the nib. This one is well tuned. It's writing well. I like it. Flow was good. Kept up in that speed test remarkably well, and I'm pleased with that nib, and so that's definitely a pro. Negative, mine would mainly be that it is a fingerprint magnet. Even just looking it over the other day and deciding whether I wanted to ink it up and write with it last week or do a first impressions review based on some other things that were going on. I had family emergencies and everything else, so this did just stay on the desk, and that's why this is just first impressions. But it's a fingerprint magnet, and I find myself wiping that thing off. So you might want to check one of the other colors if that's an issue for you, but I really like the look anyway. of that glossy black pen. I do think matte would solve that, and of course make for a really good looking pen and another model that they could sell if they wanted to do something like that. A positive for me, this is a personal positive, you may not care a bit, but if I get tired of this nib, which I don't really foresee, then it is bobby nib compatible. And that I like, because I like those bobby nibs. And so if I want to turn this into a mini Fude or a Fude nib, I can do that. And it's really an easy thing to do. You just pull that again. You just pull that straight off, replace that nib, and you're good to go. And so I like that about these pens. Any other negatives? I don't have anything in this first impression that comes to mind. Again, if a negative comes up, if it starts to be prone to dry out, or if something else happens, or the finish starts to fall off prematurely, I will let you know that again in the comments below, and I'll pin it to the top so that you can see it. But at first impressions, there are no immediate negatives that really just stand out and are a problem. I think for $7, goodness, I think this is definitely a pen that's worth a shot, because in this economy, there are fewer pens in that price range than there were a year ago, aren't there? So that's my impression of the pen. If you've got one, I'd love to know what you think about it, good, bad, or ugly, and you can share that in the comments below. As always, thank you very much for your support of this channel. Like, share, subscribe, and God bless you, and have a great week.